What's up, everyone? Welcome back. Today is the 20th of April. My name is Derek, and in today's video, we're going to talk about the passing of a 19-year-old freshman in his dorm room at Marquette University. This is a story that's of particular interest to me, not only because I live in the Milwaukee area where Marquette is, but back in 2004, less than 1 month after Cameron was born, in February of that year, my own cousin Chris passed away a few days after suffering a stroke while on campus during his freshman year at Valparaiso University. In fact, I discussed this story in depth on my channel less than a month ago. Check the description for a link to that video. Just like Cameron, my cousin was found in his dorm by his bunkmate. And this is a curious death. It's said that the student had some medical conditions, particularly diabetes. Now, I'm certainly unqualified to speculate on medical conditions like this, but I've never heard of someone with diabetes, especially someone being treated, as he apparently was since there was insulin next to his body. I've never heard of someone this young suddenly dying of diabetes. So in this video, we're going to explore the synchronicity, numerology, and astronomy surrounding this death, just as we did with my cousin Chris, who once again passed away on February 25th of 2004, just less than 1 month after Cameron was born. So, first of all, before we get into the numerology of this, let's take a quick look at Marquette University, which once again is located in my hometown of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Marquette is one of 27 colleges in the United States that were established by the Society of Jesus, also known as the Jesuits or the Jesuit Order. The current head of the Catholic Church is Pope Francis, who is the first ever member of the Jesuit order to hold the position. And as a result, this death at Marquette University is heavily synced up to Pope Francis, both his age and the date that his papacy began back in the year 2013. Now, Pope Francis, again, the head of the Catholic Church, which is centered around Christianity. And in the religion of Christianity, there's something special about 3 days. In the New Testament, Jesus is crucified, and then on the third day, he rises. Well, notice how the Jesuit order was founded on the date September 27th of 1540. The symbol primarily used by the Jesuit order is a sun with the rays of the sun emanating on the side. And that's particularly noteworthy because the man who died in this story was named Cameron Ray, much like the Jesuit logo with the 32 rays of the sun. Well, this date, the Jesuit founding date, September 27th of 1540, happens to be 3 days before a solar eclipse from Saros 136. And if you're asking what is a Saros is essentially a series of eclipses that occurs over about 1,300 years. Each eclipse from the series is separated by a little over 18 years, or 223 lunar phases. So 3 days before this eclipse, the Jesuits were founded. And notice the date of this eclipse, September 30th, the date written 930 here in the United States. Using Sumerian Gematria, where the alphabetic order is multiplied by 6, the word Christianity sums to 930. Now, what's so special about Saros 136, aside from the fact that the number 13 is the 6th prime number? Well, this Saros series began when it was the date 13/6 of 1360 in the Western Hemisphere. So you'll see this Saros cycle began on the 14th, but if you look at the time of that eclipse, it was still the 13th of June in the Western Hemisphere. So 13/6 of 1360 is when Saros 136 began. And in the standard alphabetic order, the term the Jesuits has an ordinal value of 136. If you're new to this channel, we're looking at the language of Gematria, an ancient mystical Jewish practice that takes the alphabet and assigns a numeric value to every letter. The most basic cipher is simple English Gematria. The words simple English and Gematria all summing to 74 in this cipher. So here we see that the Jesuits sums to 136. Also notice the 134 in the reverse method, where Z is 1, Y is 2, all the way through A is 26. 134 is the value of solar eclipse in ordinal. And no doubt the Jesuits were founded in accordance with this particular Saros series. So we'll talk about how his death is synced up with solar eclipses from this Saros later on in this video. But first, let's talk about the number that's in most of these headlines. A 19-year-old student, Cameron Ray. Again, Ray, like the Jesuit rays of the sun. Think about how the Tampa Bay Rays just recently completed a historic beginning to the MLB season as well, winning their first 13 games. So this number 19, in ancient Hebrew Gematria, where the mystical practice is believed to have started, the word kill has a reduction value of 19. It also sums to 244 in Hebrew Standard, and that stands out because in Latin Gematria, also called Agrippa's key, famously first pointed out by Cornelius Agrippa in the 16th century, I considered this to be the most significant cipher, particularly outside of the base methods. And here the number 19 also sums to 244. Cameron Ray died 244 days before Pope Francis's next birthday. Again, Pope Francis, the first ever Jesuit pope, Marquette University, a Jesuit college. I also noticed how this headline from Fox said that he was dead upon arrival. And this phrase in reverse also gives a 244, a number I talk about a lot on this channel, connecting to death. So let's look closer at this name, Ray. Notice how the name Ray sums to 17, 19, and 44. Again, he was 19 years old. But also the 17 and 44. These stand out as well. Ray died in Cobean Hall, which was the name of the residence where he lived. Cobean sums to 44 in ordinal. And look at the date numerology of the day he passed away. This can be seen at my date calculator here on gematrinator.com. Just looking at these primary numerologies right there. You get 44, 17, and 19, all matching the name Ray. You also get the numbers 64 and 28. Well, in English Gematria, the word kill sums to 64, 28, 44, and 17. Again, in Hebrew, it's 19, just like his age and the date numerology. This overlap is incredibly strong. In fact, not only did the date have 17 numerology, but he also died on the 17th. And this date is also the 107th day of the year. In reverse reduction, the phrase ritual sacrifice has this 107, much like kill summing to 17. There's another phrase similar to ritual sacrifice that lines up very well with this date also. Cameron passed away 76 days after his birthday. Notice how the phrase blood sacrifice equals 76 with the S exception. blood sacrifice also sums to 86 and 121. And on the date that Cameron Ray died, Pope Francis was 86 years, 121 days old. If you include the end date, you also find that Francis was 122 days after his birthday. And in the alphabetic order, Pope Francis sums to 122. Pope Francis gets his papal name from Saint Francis of Assisi. Saint Francis of Assisi is also the namesake of the city San Francisco, which also has this 122 gematria. And the city of San Francisco is located on the 122nd western meridian. So next, let's talk about this code of solar eclipses. Once again, Cameron died 3 days before the solar eclipse of 2023, which occurred earlier today. This was actually a very rare hybrid eclipse. It started out as an annular eclipse, became a total eclipse, and then returned to an annular eclipse before it ended. So Cameron died 3 days before this eclipse. Recall earlier, I talked about how the Jesuits were founded 3 days before an eclipse from Saros 136. Notice how the name Cameron and Cameron Ray both have matching values with Jesuit, just as he died at a Jesuit university. The Jesuit order's emblem, the sun with the rays on the side. So here's where it gets wild. We're talking about this number 136, right? The Jesuits, 136. On the date that Cameron Ray died, not only was Pope Francis exactly 1,036 months old, but he was also the Pope for exactly 10 years and 36 days. Now, in numerology, it's important to understand that this 0 can be ignored. So you're looking at a double 136 alignment with the Pope on this date. So let's take a look at this. If we measure to the next eclipse that belongs to Saros 136, this eclipse will occur over the country of Egypt. That's where it reaches the peak eclipse in 2027. Cameron Ray died 4 years, 107 days before that eclipse. And that stands out because he died on April 17th, or 4/17. As far as the 107, he died on the 107th day of the year. Also, he died 224 weeks exactly before that same eclipse. The Jesuits are formally referred to as the Society of Jesus, which has an ordinal value of 224. The most recent eclipse from Saros 136 occurred back in July of 2009. And this was actually a very special eclipse. Not only was it over 7 minutes in length, but notice how the path of totality passed directly over the city of Wuhan, China, which has become notorious for being the origin of the COVID-19 pandemic that allegedly began in the year 2020. And this should be no surprise because the coronavirus has been completely synced up with the Jesuit order ever since it started. The coronavirus vaccine was first approved by the FDA with an announcement being made on December 14th of 2020. Well, on December 14th of 2020, there was a total solar eclipse with peak eclipse over the country of Argentina. Argentina is home to Pope Francis, the first ever pope from the Americas. But this eclipse is important for another reason. This eclipse in 2020, the same date as the COVID-19 vaccine, is the exact halfway point between the two great American total solar eclipses that create an X over the United States. The 2020 eclipse was a span of 1,212 days after the first Great American Eclipse, and exactly 1,212 days before the next one. In Gematria, the phrase total solar eclipse sums to 1212 and 202, just like the year 2020. And that eclipse, on December 14th of 2020, began lunation number 1212. This, we're looking at the brown lunation number. This system began in 1923. It counts every new moon. So on the same date that lunation 1212 began, we had an eclipse that was 1,212 days away from each of the Great American Eclipses. So it's no surprise that we had a very significant event on that date. And again, that's when the coronavirus vaccine was approved. And now, as the years have passed, we've learned that there's a lot wrong with that vaccine. Something I want to point out as well is that if you measure from that eclipse, the one over Argentina, to the death of this Cameron Ray at Marquette, it was exactly 122 weeks later. And earlier, we just looked at this number, San Francisco 122, named after Saint Francis of Assisi, just like Pope Francis, which also equals 122. Showing that, once again, the layers of coding are deeper than most of us even understand. Now, last year, 2021, I did a post on Marquette University explaining why Milwaukee has a school named after this explorer and Christian missionary, Jacques Marquette. In the language of Gematria, Jacques Marquette equals 61. And notice how he was born on June 1st. Marquette was born in the year 37 and died at the age of 37. 37 is the reduction value of Milwaukee, where the university named after him exists. Jacques Marquette would die on the date May 18th, or 518. Marquette University was founded by a man named John Martin Henney, whose name sums to 518, just like the date that Jacques Marquette died. If you measure from the last total solar eclipse from Saros 136, this one on the left side of your screen, again, the eclipse that passed over Wuhan, China, he died 5,018 days after that eclipse. And how wild is that, considering that last year I mentioned this is a number associated with Marquette. In fact, John Henney was also born in the year 1805. Notice how John Henney died on September 7th, or 9/7. The name John Henney equals 97 in the alphabetic order. In standard Gematria, John Henney equals 250. And the date he died, 9/7, is the 250th day of the year. So even back in the 19th century, these guys were dying by the numbers. The name John Martin Henney, the founder of Marquette University, also has matching 233 reverse Gematria with the Pope's real name, Jorge Bergoglio. Now, 233 is a number I talk about from time to time. The number 1331, when spelled out, equals 233. And this is the ultimate eclipse number, 1331. Down in the description below, you'll find my post talking about this number, laying everything out that explains how this is the ultimate eclipse number. Cameron Ray died 233 days after the establishment date of Marquette University, which is August 28th. 233 is also a prime number, divisible only by 1 and itself. Now, 233 is the 51st prime number. Notice how Marquette sums to 51 in reverse reduction, or Pythagorean. And if you measure to the second Great American Total Solar Eclipse, Cameron died exactly 51 weeks before that date. Now, if you instead measure from the first eclipse back in 2017 to the date that he died, you get 2,066 days. And this is a number that's also significant to Pope Francis, who is the 266th Pope in the history of the Catholic Church. 266. Now, there's some very basic prime numerology with Pope Francis becoming the Pope as well. So again, he was the 266th Pope. Now, the second prime number is 3, and the sixth prime number is 13. And this is the date that he became the Pope, 3/13 of 13. The second, the sixth, and the sixth prime numbers. Here you see it. And remember, this date was carefully chosen. The previous Pope, Benedict, stepped down from his position as Pope to allow this to happen. There's a few more interesting things about this date. Notice how Jesuit and Jesuits both have overlapping gematria with the phrase number of the beast. Cameron Ray died on the 17th of April, or 17/4, which is the date that leaves 258 days on the calendar. And in gematria, number of the beast equals 174 and 258 reverse. His name syncs up with number of the beast in reduction. And Cameron Ray was born on the 31st of January. Now, interestingly enough, the 31st of January is also the same date that the city of Milwaukee was incorporated. See this? January 31st. Cameron Ray, born January 31st. Well, that date can also be written as 31/1, much like the number 311. The word beast, actually the beast, equals 311 in Latin gematria. Also notice how the beast equals 136. The Jesuits, 136. Furthermore, 311 is the 64th prime number. And look at the date he died once again. Primary numerology of 64. 64, the reverse sum of the word kill. Now, as it appears from the outside, the Jesuit order is essentially the Masonic or militant branch of the Catholic Church, a very secretive organization. But it's certainly connected to Freemasonry in many ways. Notice how Pope Francis has matching reduction gematria with Freemasonry. Well, in reverse, Freemasonry equals 158. And if you measure from the date that Milwaukee was incorporated to the date that Cameron Ray was born, you get exactly 158 years. The full name of Freemasonry, let's actually bring this up here. Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Notice how in Latin, you get a value of 1911. When Cameron Ray died, he was a span of exactly 19 years and 11 weeks old. In Satanic Gematria, the phrase ritual human sacrifice, also this 9/11. Of course, perhaps the biggest ritual human sacrifice in United States history occurred on 9/11, when the World Trade Center towers were brought down in New York City, killing a wide number of employees and firefighters in the building. So, is there something sinister going on at our universities? Are these students, including my cousin, falling victim to some sort of spiritual warfare that's perhaps in the ether around these universities. I make these videos because I just want to know more about what's really happening in this world. It never made sense to me that my cousin died when he did. He was just a couple months before his 19th birthday. He was in great shape, peak physical condition, and suddenly he had a stroke. And I understand these things happen, but why do they happen so significantly by the numbers? Why is there so much alarming synchronicity around these events? To me, this is one of the great mystical questions that we have on this planet. And, certainly there are many truths that are hidden from people in this world to keep them dumb, to keep them following and obedient. And, some people, they should be following and just obedient, but there are many of us who seek to know more and look for greater spiritual truth in this world, and I think it's fair to ask these questions about what's really going on. All right, everybody, that'll do it for this video. To support this work, please visit the website and check out the membership section, as I don't get sponsorships or anything on YouTube, since this work is censored on most mainstream platforms. So in order to get by, it requires some support. I appreciate everyone who hangs out in the chat, supports the work. It's greatly appreciated. So with that, peace, love, God bless, and we'll talk to you next time. See ya.